Welcome back to the program. Let's focus on Ethiopia. It's among the fastest growing non-oil economies on the planet. The country's GDP growth was over 10% last year. Now that growth is attributed in part to government reforms undertaken in recent years, which have succeeded in gradually opening up the economy to a lot more FDI and the expansion of commercial agriculture and the manufacturing industry. Ethiopia's reformist Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed recently introduced a new cabinet that's half made up of women in an unprecedented push for gender parity and more efficiency in how public services are delivered. Now, the move is expected to promote a lot more inclusive social and economic growth across the country. But let's dig a little deeper into the details of exactly how all of this will work. James Wakiaga is an economist with the Ethiopian unit of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. He joins us now from the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. James, thank you very much for your time. What reactions have you seen, especially within the business community, to this new cabinet?
Oh, thank you, Rama. This has really been a welcome news to the business community. Basically, this really creates a positive effect to the economy in terms of just building the investor confidence. We are all excited, really, and this is quite unprecedented, as you rightly mentioned, for the continent of Africa. Very few countries have been able to reach the gender parity of 50-50 when it comes to the sharing of the cabinet position. So the business community is also excited, because if you look also at the level, the capacity of the people who've been selected into the cabinet, quite capable individuals, both men and women.
Indeed. So given that the Prime Minister, though, has made peace with Eritrea, will the new defense minister have the task of reforming the military, reorienting spending away from essentially building up an army for war that at least now is essentially off the table, and trying to reorient that spending into other parts of the Ethiopian economy?
Certainly, the signing of the peace deal between Ethiopia and Eritrea was indeed a welcome news, not only for Ethiopia and Eritrea, but generally for the region. First of all, we are beginning to see an impact in terms of the economic exchange, particularly on the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Shops are back in action. There's a lot of movement, both in terms of airline, between the two countries, but also in terms of just creating the investor confidence in the entire Horn of Africa region. I think this is very positive news, which you all need to latch upon in terms of making sure that regional integration becomes a reality. So this is something we are all looking forward. Hopefully, the countries of the Horn of Africa will come together and basically look at some of the drivers of regional economic integration in terms of infrastructure investment in the areas of trade. And the fact that now we have peace, it really boosts not only the regional investors, but also the foreign investors in terms of putting investment into the region.
Of course, and it does create a lot more fiscal space for spending on other things. But the Prime Minister also said that the country's foreign reserves have gone up by about 30% in his speech to legislators yesterday. But do we know how much Ethiopia has at the moment in foreign currency reserves?
Yeah, no doubt one of the lingering challenges the investors have been facing, of course, has been the whole issue of the foreign exchange shortage. And I think in the last couple of months, since His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy came into power, there have been some reorientation in terms of the policy to boost the foreign exchange. Of course, I recall the aid support that came from the Middle Eastern friendly countries, specifically from the United Arab Emirates, but also from the Saudi Arabia. This was quite a boost to the economy. The World Bank as well has pledged 1 billion, which is also anchored on the economic reforms that are being pursued. And I think all these measures will have a reorientation of the policy, of the economic policy for the country, in terms of not only boosting the FDI flows, which will have an impact in terms of the foreign exchange reserve, but also just in terms of making sure that the business community are able to access adequate foreign reserves. In terms of whether it's enough, based on the recent IMF assessment, which was here in town last month, I think we have an import cover of about 18 months import cover, which is quite adequate if compared with the average, which is about 2.5 to 3 months of import cover.
Right. One last question for you. So for years now, businesses across the region that have been dealing with Ethiopia, businesses within Ethiopia, they've all been complaining about this lack of foreign currency availability in the country. But ever since the Prime Minister took office, with all the deals you've mentioned, all this cash coming in from the UAE, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the World Bank, has that situation improved?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, things are looking up, Rama. If you look at it from a mid-term and long-term perspective, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is definitely putting the right policies in terms of making sure that the country is able to mobilize enough resources. A good example, of course, is if you look at Ethiopia's industrialization strategy, which basically focuses on export of the light manufacturing products. And already we are beginning to see an impact in terms of the share of the export ratio to the GDP. So I think these are positive steps. Only last week, Prime Minister Ahmed Abiy was able to open the new export processing zone. And there are quite a number of these which have been spread across the country, and this will have an impact in terms of shoring the manufactured exports for Ethiopia. And this should be able to see an improvement in the current account in general.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. James Okiaga, economist with UNDP, thank you very much for your time.